70, Indigenous Australians their children were taken away from their families simply because they were Indigenous. So that has led to an enormous amount of widespread transgenerational trauma. And if we fast forward to 2010, sorry, I'm trying to hurry.
No, take your time. Now we have time.
We see enormous health disparities right across the lifespan. So this is not an age pyramid, it's actually an age and death pyramid, showing, if you look at those purple bars, the very high proportion of Indigenous Australians that pass away very early in their lives. So right at the bottom, that's showing the infant mortality gap, those purple bars, and then we can see it goes in a little bit in childhood, and it comes right out from teenagers to the middle ages and tapers in. The yellow bars are representing the fact that most non-Indigenous people live at the end through a full lifespan. So we see that disparity right across the lifespan. And if you ask different groups about why is this case, what's causing this ongoing mortality and health gap, definitely we have socioeconomic factors, we have access to health services that's poor, all sorts of behavioral, biomedical, environmental risk factors. But if you ask Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, they'll tell you that it's from dispossession from land, it's from breaking family and cultures, the transgenerational trauma, incarceration, discrimination, and heartbreak. And I can tell you, looking ahead, I don't think it takes too much thinking to realize that climate change will exacerbate all of those things, right? Both kinds of characteristics. And I often turn to this wonderful graph figure from Mental Health and Our Changing Climate from the United States, showing that physical health, mental health, community health intersecting impacts. So this is the background to what we'll be looking at now. There was a lot of hope in 2009 when the Australian government finally joined most of the rest of the world in signing the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. There was a lot of hope that the rights to health, the rights to land and resources, and the rights to land and water custodianship would simply grow in Australia as a result of this wonderful step forward. However, in the last decade, we've seen anything but. So in Australia, our biggest climate drivers, I'm sure those of you attending the COP or looking at the news, is that Australia has not been leaders in terms of climate change responses, and that's mainly because of coal and gas mining. Coal mining in particular, gas mining growing. There's so many developments on the books right now. And that's also tearing Indigenous peoples off of their land because of the sprawling nature of these massive developments. So in my last 2 minutes, I'll just to highlight really quickly, four places where there is massive things going on in terms of dispossessing, disempowering Indigenous peoples. So this is Australia, and all of those colors there represent different cultures, different clan groups, different languages, different ways of living with their environment. So you can see Australia actually has more than 5 states and 2 territories. We actually have over 200 groups, cultural groups across the country. So on the western side right now, the Fitzroy River and the Kimberley, that area there is being threatened by developments in terms of fracking and also water mining, so taking from the Great Fitzroy River and actually bottling river water up, which we've seen has caused disasters in many places. In the Northern Territory, we see fracking. There's plans to expand massively. And then on the right hand and the eastern side, we have the Wangan and Jagalingou people. Probably many of you heard about the Adani coal mine that Australians have been fighting for some time now. And up in the north there, the Torres Strait Islands, where sea level rise, extremely hot conditions are threatening livelihood, culture, and human rights. So I'll just take you really quickly, a slide or two, a picture to show you what's going on. Here in the Kimberley, it's a common theme of getting some, having moratoriums that are then lifted, and then whatever considerations for Indigenous in the Kimberley, where traditional owners originally said, no, you can make the decision, are now being sidelined around fracking. Shale gas mining in the Northern Territory, that's a fantastic report there from Professor Ian Lowe. That's a map of the Northern Territory showing just how much of the territory is actually slated for potential development in terms of gas. It's a huge area, but there's resistance, and Indigenous peoples across Australia are either leading the resistance or being put in front whenever there's marches, etc. There's great acknowledgement of traditional knowledge and traditional rights. So this is SEEDMA. That's a group of young people who are working particularly in the Northern Territory, helping communities fight gas mining. And here's just another wonderful picture showing how this is actually enabling young Indigenous people to connect with their elders and talking about these issues. Oops. And then we'll just go over to Queensland, where the Adani Carmichael mine, with a potential 60 million tons of coal produced per annum, not good for the climate, as well as massive infrastructure, all on traditional lands of the Wangan and Jagalingou people. The loss of areas such as this, incredibly beautiful ecological ecosystems that are under threat. And we see the bank, for example, here, bankrupting of First Nations leaders, and particularly the brutal set of new standards of corporate behavior that have been alleged to have been occurring in terms of how Indigenous peoples have been treated. And unfortunately also, native title was actually extinguished by our premier, our state premier in Queensland, without any announcement. So native title is something that Indigenous peoples have fought for and actually made quite steps forward with it, but so easy to extinguish even overnight without announcement. And the Torres Strait Islander people, there's 17 islands up in the Torres Strait. They are unique, completely unique in all the road culture, and they just launched a case with the UN, so there's some voice happening there. So our core tragedy in Australia, but I think it's also extends beyond Australia, is that Indigenous peoples, young people, and many other thinking people, we do have the answers. We've been hearing that all morning. The answers are there, but those who have contributed the least are often suffering the most. But our core hope is that in many places they're leading the charge, so in fact they're not giving up. So I often think, well, what right do I have to give up if people experiencing such incredible threats to their cultures, their identities, etc. So finding that hope in this story, I think, is really important for all of us. And finally, just like to say, just sort of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australian survival and resilience over the 220 years of difficulties have taught us critical lessons about the importance of culture, identity, healing, empowerment, and self-determination embedded in people's lives. Thank you.
Here's another question for you.
Yes?
So I'm Australian too, and for me, when I was in school, we didn't get a lot of exposure to this education. I feel like when I come to talks like this, I get more than I did in my 12 years of Australian primary and secondary education. But the one person I did remember was Eddie Mabo.
Yes.
And he was pivotal in so many things to do with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land rights especially. What do you think in today's movement we can learn from him? And maybe you could speak real quickly about who Eddie Mabo was.
Yes, so I'll just say first around Australian people not getting the truth. So I actually taught 280 undergraduate students for the first time. They were just coming into university. That little one slide there, they were shocked and they were angry. They were angry because they didn't learn. Aboriginal history was sort of ticked in between the Roman Empire and the settlement of America. So I think Indigenous people are doing what they can, but I think all Australians need to come behind them and expose these truths and expose what is actually happening now. For those students, if they were shocked to know that these things were still affecting Aboriginal people. And so once you start to pick it apart a little bit, you go, oh my gosh, what didn't I know? But the idea is not to feel guilty, it's actually to get active. Thank you.
All right. Antonio, we would love to hear from you now.
Thank you. Control L.
Can I do it?
I think.
No. You do it. There you go.
All right. Well, my name is Antonio. I'm a student here in the Compromiso. This is my fifth year of medical school, and I'm actually the president of the Consejo Estatal de Estudiantes de Medicina. It's an association of medical students in Spain. We represent 42,000 medical students, divided in the 43 faculties of medicine in Spain. And so we were asked to talk about health, civil society, and global engagement for a safe climate. So the first thing we were thinking was about, so you may have, when you were coming to this faculty, you may have get out of the metro, and you may have seen this statue. This is a horse, and this is a man driving another man's torch. So here in college, I don't know if this is a representation of college, but it tends to believe that the knowledge and information, it's like this. It's somebody that is giving the information to another. So there is always, all the time, just one passing of the baton. However, information is not like that. It's more like a disease. Because if I have the information, right now I'm not just giving the information to you or to you, I'm giving to a group of people, and then that group of people can grow, and then each one of you have the possibility of give that information to many, many more people. So the information is exponential. It's exponential? Yeah, well, and so right now we live in a society that we live in social media. So raise your hand if you have a Facebook account, if you use WhatsApp, you use Twitter, Instagram, any of those. So this is a disease. Or it's at least a way that we can spread those diseases. And sometimes we get the fake news. Sometimes we get some information that it's not true, but it's sold as if it were. So we, as medical doctors, a lot of our patients have a lot of trust in what we say. So we can say that doctors, we have a responsibility. First of all, we have a responsibility in our relationship between the doctor and the patient, because we have not just to be aware of the biological sphere of the patient, we also have to be aware of the psychological sphere and the social sphere that it's around the patient. But actually, we have another responsibility that we are not talking about. We are doctors, but we use social media. We are social media users. We are using that information, I hope, for good. And because we actually have the information that we can contrast with that is coming to us. So we can say, this is not true, and this is actually harmful, not just for you, but for the whole society. Sometimes some publications are being just really questioned about climate health. If we have the information, we have the duty to say, this is the truth. You cannot deny the evidence. And the third one, responsibility, we are political entities. Each one of us, not just doctors, every one of us, we are political entities. We have the power to get together and make changes. This picture is the Ministry of Health here in Spain. Last year, there were huge cuts in health. So all the profession and health professionals, doctors, nurses, they got together and they did a parade. They did a march in front of the ministry. So if the health is something so important for a country, that's why we have so much power, not as individuals, but as groups. So here in The Lancet, one of the most prestigious journals in medicine and in sciences, they said health and climate change, making the link matter. So health and climate change, it's connected. That's the information, that's what we take as evidence. And this is what we're seeing. Mesoamerican nephropathy. So it's a disease of the kidneys that it used to be just Mesoamerican in Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, countries that were in that area, that because it's a kidney disease that it affects the people who are cutting the sugar cane for manufacturers because they are the heat exposure, because they are dehydrated, because they are exposed to many diseases, infectious diseases. But most important, well, not I don't know if most important, but they're also being exposed to pesticides and many things that are being used for industrial production of sugar cane, and that's affecting health. I mean, the way we produce, it's also affecting the health of people. And not every people, just people who are already in a really difficult situation. So, this picture is of yesterday. It's in the parade of the Fridays for Future. And here in Spain, we are starting some groups, for example, Extinction Rebellion, like Dr. Rita is going to show it later. But here, XR Sanidad from Murcia, they came here, they are working for that, they are doing that political part of that we health providers that need to get involved into. Because climate change is a health emergency. So, conclusions. As doctors, we have a duty to fight for individual and public health. We must fight fake news and provide scientific answers, not only to our patients, but also to the social media. We have to participate in those things and saying, this is true, this is not true. Always comparing with the literature that is available for us. And we have the muscle to stop a country and make them listen. Because when we health providers stop, they won't have another opportunity than just listen. We health providers, we have a heart, it doesn't fit in our chest. And we say, how can I going to not attend this patient? But you have to think in the long term. If we continue just, okay, today I will keep going, I will keep going. If we don't take action, the system won't change. I mean, all the things we've seen, all the inequalities in the world will continue. So that's something that we have to and get our action together. And that's all. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Antonio. Leading on to that, perfect segue, we will now have Dr. Courtney Howard talking about the CODA initiative and other advocacy that she's on.
Thank you. So while we switch the slides, I just want to just say that our situation in Canada with regards to Indigenous peoples and resource extraction is very similar. My very first motion in the Canadian Medical Association General Council was asking the CMA to support increased peer-reviewed studies into the local health impacts of oil sands. The only time I've ever gotten yelled at there. And we ended up watering it down. That was in 2012. There still haven't been any peer-reviewed studies into the health impacts of oil sands. So when Francois was there saying that the research hasn't been done, it's really hard to be a doctor in an international place knowing that your community has let a community down so badly. So anyway, something that I will let you guys know, you're the first to know, the tech mine that Francois was talking about, we've taken a vote as a board and we will come up publicly against it, which isn't something physicians in Canada have done very often. But when we think about how hard it is to stop something once it starts, and how environmental racism is such a huge part of resource extraction in almost all of our countries, it's the right thing to do. So I suspect we're going to get yelled at again, probably on social media. But it's a time that demands that kind of courage. You know, when I see how courageous my Indigenous leaders are in coming into our spaces, in putting their bodies in front of resource extraction projects, in bringing their children places when they really, you know, it's at that, they're doing this. And it's time that we are as brave as they are and take inspiration from that. So that's a decision we've just made in the last couple of days, and we'll see where we go with it. So that's with my Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment hat on. This is with a different hat on. So CODA is an entirely new initiative, and this is my very first presentation ever on it. I booked for about 20 in the next couple of months, so there we go. We'll see how the trial run goes. So essentially what has occurred is that there was a doctor, an emerge doc in Australia one day who went to a medical conference and said, this is really dumb. Like, we can do medical education better than this. And they had kind of an arts event, so they put together these really exciting, sort of flashy TEDx-style conferences, and they called, because they're emergency doctors, they called them SMAC, so social media and critical care. And they're really good at social media, and they're really good. They actually work with a public relations firm, which isn't something they often do in medicine or in advocacy, and they're really good at graphics. And through that, and these flashy conferences, they built an international community of 25,000 medics. So their website, Life in the Fast Lane, gets 1 million page views a day. And at one point last year, they kind of, probably because they're also emerge docs and they have a short attention span, they got bored of that and they were like, okay, so now we're bored, we created a community. You guys are smart, you're smart, you're smart, you're a good person, so we should do something good for the world. And so they essentially picked their entire SMAC community up, told them they were now CODA, boink, like this, and so now CODA has 25,000 Twitter followers, and we are an action-oriented community. So they don't want to talk about stuff, they just want to do things. And they surveyed that community, and they said, hey, there's all these things that are happening, there's antibiotic resistance, there's, our sepsis protocols aren't where they could be, what do you want to talk about? And they said, we want to talk about climate change. 70% of that international community said that climate change was the #1 health issue that they wanted to address. And so what they decided they wanted to do, and Hugh Montgomery, who's one of the co-chairs of the Lancet Countdown, is very involved in this, we want to create, recognizing that change is made through the accomplishment of focused goals in an iterative fashion, we are going to create a short list of action items that we're going to ask the world's medics to do in service of a healthy climate. And so that's my job right now. So I've been hired to find the world's smartest people, and I have done that, put them into working groups, so food, energy, transport, sustainable healthcare, and we're sort of sliding in finance, and we're also sort of sliding in medical education. So don't tell my bosses because they didn't tell me. And what we're going to do is we're going to, over the next couple of months, make some action plans. So where we're going is we're going to use the power of the people that we can feel everywhere here, and we're going to channel it. So our big event is going to be in Melbourne. So essentially what's going to happen over the next little while is we've just started a website, and so you can see sort of the attention to graphic design here. You can see, like, if you push the next button on the website, you only get about 2 paragraphs. So that's the level of information we're targeting for, like, the sort of center, middle ground of medics. And our main messages are very, very simple. So lives are at stake. Next one. And so this is all based on the concept that, if you think about how we get things done in the real world, you start with data, you turn it into policy suggestions, sort of like the Lancet policy brief, process, which is, I love. And then you have to actually get that done. So what we're working on is the place between policy and implementation. And this is all sort of coming from a theory of change that I've been working with for a while now, and this was essentially taught to me by environmental campaigners. We go to school as docs and we don't get taught how to campaign. And so when I first became a board member for the Canadian Association of Physicians of the Environment, it was about 10 years ago now, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I live in the north and it's melting, and I was very motivated, and I sort of showed up and I was like, let's solve climate change! And the executive director was like, what's your target? I was like, what do you mean? Let's solve climate change! He's like, Courtney, you need a target. And we did that for about 3 years, and eventually the target we found was that we wanted to phase out coal in Alberta. And so in a very targeted way, working behind the scenes with environmental actors, and to put this in context, this is the province the tar sands are in. So this is Canada's most conservative province. But once we produced a report that said how many kids were dying because of the air pollution related to the coal-fired power plants, we put that in the media. Nobody had known that. Nobody wants to see kids dying of asthma. Nobody wants to spend that money on the healthcare. We put that out. We got commitments from 4 out of the 5 political parties prior to the provincial election to phase out coal if they were elected. One of them was elected, and the coal power phase out is ongoing. So that's what we did in Alberta. We did the exact same thing nationally. And so Canada committed to a coal power phase out. And then that allowed Canada to co-found the Powering Past Coal Alliance with the UK, where doctors had also been extremely involved in the Powering Past Coal. So those kinds of stories, when you think about it, so we picked our target, we had our win. When you have a win, people get excited, they like to jump on a bandwagon, they're like, hey, cool. Then that builds your team. You get to pick a bigger target, so in this case, the Canadian coal power phase out. You get a win, you get a bigger team, you get another target, so now we're international. And so one of our goals now is to get as many, having inspired everybody, each mutually inspiring the next, to continue to build this. So it's this is something that Marshall Gans has been describing for a while. So when we think about how to motivate people, this is his schema. So he says that action inhibitors are inertia, apathy, fear, isolation, and self-doubt. And those are all, emotions that I think most of us have experienced at some point. And he has sort of a fix for each of those. So for inertia, he says to fix that with a sense of urgency. And that's what we've done with our climate emergency language. That's what we're doing that's what Greta is helping us with. So she's overcoming our inertia with a sense of urgency. She's overcoming that apathy, that like, oh man, with anger. There's a lot of anger in the way she's speaking. And so that's another way to get people off the couch and involved. She's overcoming the fear. Even her story is overcoming this fear of sort of, it's scary to even go to a meeting. Like I talk to people, they're like, how do I start? And I'm like, just go to a meeting. Like in a new space, talk to people you've never met before, and you can see that they're a little bit scared. And it's true. Every single step along this way is a little bit scary. You go to your first meeting, you speak on a topic that you've never talked about, and because so many of the solutions are multidisciplinary, it means you're almost always feeling dumb somewhere. You're sitting in the urban planners meeting and you've never been, I'm a doctor. So in order to learn, you have to ask the dumb questions. So it's going to the new space, speaking to the new people, being willing to be the person asking the dumb questions, and then being willing to just learn new things mutually to go on. So, there's this fear, but what you overcome with that is hope. And so, imagine how scared Greta was that first day that she went and she sat down in front of the parliament with her sign. That would have been a scary thing to do. And now we saw 5 people with her, then we saw, 100 people with her, and now we have 500,000 people in the streets here. And so what that's taught us is hope. She's given us hope. And also she showed us the value of solidarity. So now that the more people there are, the more that inspires other people. And once you have solidarity, you can do so many things. And she's also shown us that one person can make a difference. So if one of the scary things, the action inhibitors, is self-doubt, that feeling that the YCMAD, that stands for you can make a difference. So she's basically shown us that one person who a year ago was sitting by herself in front of a building with a handmade sign can make a difference. And so these are what we're doing is we're trying to take advantage not only of the evidence, but of the way people think, the way that their hearts are moved, and the way we're approaching things. And really, one of the main things we're doing is, because what we have with that big group is this sense of solidarity. So we're going to use all of that. We're going to use the sense of solidarity. We're going to pick a target. We're going to tell the stories of what's worked in the past so that people have that sense of making a difference. So we're going to find case studies of where coal has been phased out. We're going to find case studies of where doctors or nurses have advocated successfully for bike lanes in all sorts of different contexts. And we're going to tell those stories and share those stories, because one thing that you can do to overcome fear is provide mentorship. So I find that, one of the best things about COP is you meet all sorts of new people. And so I had a conversation with a doctor from South Africa yesterday who really wants to work on coal, but he didn't know where to start. So we just sat down in the cafeteria, we're like, this is what we did, da-da-da-da-da-da. And he was so excited, and I was so excited because I wanted to find someone from South Africa. And so what the benefit of these spaces is that we can teach one another and mentor one another and just upskill the whole community so quickly. And so that's why I think that this moment in time is just incredible. So act together and we will all win. I'm excited to produce these action plans over about the next 8 months. Keep a lookout for them. They'll be published in different parts of the New England Journal over the spring. And then they're going to monitor the social media feedback so we can get even the better ideas from the big group. And we're going to present the final plan that will be modified by that feedback at a big flashing conference in Melbourne next fall. So thank you very much. I look forward to working with all of you on these action plans. And it's just an exciting moment in time.
Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah. Wow, that's an incredible initiative. Yeah.
I hope so.
I think so. Okay, so we are down to our last presentation. Dr. Rita unfortunately can't join us in person. However, she was kind enough to send a little video presentation.
Hello, my name is
We're
Rita.
gonna watch that now.
I'm an academic GP trainee in London, and I'm speaking today as one of the founders of Doctors for Extinction Rebellion. I'm really sorry to not be able to join you in person, but I hope that this crucial time the conference has been useful, it's been powerful, and it's been decisive in taking the action that we all know is required. Extinction Rebellion's first action was just over a year ago on the 31st of October 2018. Having been involved in the climate and health space for a number of years, I was excited and curious to find, like many of us I imagine, that the climate crisis was moving into public discourse. And so Extinction Rebellion has 3 demands. The first is for governments to tell the truth about the severity of the climate crisis. The second is for governments to act now. And Extinction Rebellion has quite strict timeframes within which it wants to act. So that's reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2025. The third is to act beyond politics. So creating citizens' assemblies which can really lead the way on climate and ecological justice. So Doctors for Extinction Rebellion emerged after the 2 weeks of occupation during the April Rebellion. And firstly, for me, it was important to bring health into discussions around the climate crisis, and also to use our influence, reach, and privilege as health professionals to help with the image issue of such movements. So we couldn't be so easily dismissed as just being young and idealistic, or being crusty hippies when you suddenly have doctors, very trusted professionals, involved in the movements. So Doctors for Extinction Rebellion is one branch. We are very much aligned with Extinction Rebellion's demands, somewhat in recognition that 2025 is aspirational, but it's important to be setting the goalposts down, moving over to really go in that direction. And then we have another group, Health Declares Emergency, that targets 2030, and it's generally for people who were already working within institutions, felt that they couldn't be seen to be taking non-violent direct action, but also wanted decisive movement on the climate crisis. And so what we have is this external and internal movement in this direction for decisive action around climate change and health. I ended up writing an article for a newspaper called The Independent, because I really do feel that joining Extinction Rebellion, for me as a doctor, is a moral duty. The General Medical Council, Guidance on Good Clinical Practice, says that we must hold human life with the utmost respect. We need to practice from a scientific evidence base, and we need to act promptly when patients. If we as doctors and health professionals respect this ethical code, and we also recognise that the science says that the climate crisis is, as the Lancet has called it, the greatest threat to human health of the 21st century, then we are left with no other option but to act. So in terms of some of the things that Doctors for Extinction Rebellion has been doing, firstly, one of our colleagues, Cliff, went on hunger strike for 15 days. This was followed up by an action outside the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy with 30 to 40 doctors. Really, there was a number of different roles that people filled. There wasn't any expectation to get in trouble with the law or to be arrested, although 4 people bravely did step into that position, and you could just see them in the back of the image there, glued onto the doors of the building and climbed on top of the doors. During October, we developed something called the Planetary Health Hub, where we held a symposium on planetary health, and this was our timetable, and it was really in response to Extinction Rebellion's first demand of tell the truth from the scientists, and as people often working on the front line where we truly see the impacts of the climate crisis on health, we felt it was our duty to stand up and speak about what we've observed and also start to bring some solutions forward for the next steps. We also held a big march. Over 300 health professionals gathered, and we laid out 110 pairs of shoes to signify the daily number of deaths in the UK as a result of air pollution. And since then, we've also had a number of different successes across the health field. So we've had a number of Royal Colleges all committing to divesting fossil fuels. We've had the Royal College of GPs declare a climate emergency. And we've also had other more far-reaching positive consequences. So really building a community and a network of health professionals who care about the climate crisis, who previously felt isolated in their communities and didn't really have people to turn to, and now got this vibrant community of over 700 people willing to take action. We've trained over 60 people in learning how to speak to the media and really become truth tellers within the media. And it's also just been a really engaging political education for many of us. Another success that we've recently had is that the Lancet has come out very publicly in support of Doctors for Extinction Rebellion. And Richard Horton, the editor of the Lancet, said, "It may be an exaggeration to say health workers have 14 days to change the world, but not much." And so with that, I will leave you going back into COP and thinking, what is my power and my privilege as a health professional, and how can I utilise that voice that I have, that very unique voice of being able to bring together the science, being connected to people in frontline communities, being very well trusted, and also being able to speak truth to power. How can you use this opportunity to change the world?
My name is Richard Horton and I'm editor of The Lancet. The climate crisis is one of the most,
You want to read this?
I would say, the most existential crisis facing our communities in the world today. Doctors and all health professionals have a responsibility and obligation to engage in all kinds of non-violent social protest to address the climate emergency. If every single person who's a health professional just did one thing every single week, we'd be having millions of people committing themselves, acting in a way that, when you multiply that up over time, could be absolutely transformational. The brave acts, sometimes the small brave acts of a large number of people, have made the difference.
I took an oath that the duty to my patients would come first. With the climate crisis, protection and safety of my patients is not coming first, and therefore it's up to us as doctors to lay down a marker and say enough is enough.
When you've read the science, you get nightmares. Floods, wildfires, rising sea levels, extinction of all those animals that we rely on. In the global south, people are already living with the effects of extreme weather and climate change. I've seen it. I'm an A&E doctor. I've looked after people in some of those settings.
I'm a practicing GP. I've not been involved in activism before, the usual writing letters, signing petitions and so on, but things still go on getting worse and worse. Having been a pretty lifelong conformist who doesn't really like upsetting people, this is well out of my comfort zone, but it's just something that's got to be done. There does seem to be something that will make a difference, and that there is a chance of turning this thing around.
I'm a mother of 3. I've come here today to do something about the climate crisis so that the doctors can make our voices heard.
I've got 3 kids and they're really the reason why I'm here, because when I think about their future, I feel genuinely scared that I have a duty to them really to act, so that when they turn around to me in 10 years and say, well, Dad, what did you do when you found out about this stuff, that I can say, well, actually I tried and just keep going to work and just plodding on.
I'm feeling really nervous, but it feels much better to be doing something about it and feeling totally powerless to make any difference at all.
My baby will be 31 in 2050 and I have no idea what her future holds. When your government refuses to look after you and your children, you have to act.
I've done everything that's polite, so now it's come to this.
I feel I have no choice but to rebel.
We're doing this because the government isn't taking action on climate change. This is our duty. This is our duty. It's our duty to act.
On that note, so those 2 sentences, we need everyone and this is our duty. It would be great right now if we could do a little exercise with you guys. So we were talking before and we were thinking about the 3 main actors in this space of civil society and global engagement. So we've got small island nations and indigenous peoples. We've got the youth movement, and we've got the medical community. So those, for us, in terms of climate and health, these seem to be the 3 big players, these 3 big pockets of opportunity. So if I could, I might get you guys to stand up and take 1, 2, 3 corners of the room and break you guys up into groups of 3. So people interested in talking more and discussing about small island nations and indigenous people activism goes to Melissa. Yep, she's down there, or wherever spot she wants. The medical community, so medical students and doctors with Courtney, and the youth movement with Antonio. So while you're there, it would be great if we could do 2 things. 1, think about accelerated solutions, and 2, priority recommendations that you would like to make as a group. So that would be great if you could disperse, and I will ring the bell in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Hasta aquí esta conferencia. Sobre salud, sociedad civil y compromiso global para un clima seguro. Ahora se crean unos grupos de trabajo en los que llegan unos temas. Vamos a comprobar cómo están creando los diversos grupos. Y vamos a dejar aquí, de alguna manera, también mostrar pues parte de lo que se produce. Parte de lo que se produce en esta cumbre global por el clima en Madrid, el interior de la cumbre. Esta mañana hemos presenciado también algunas de las ponencias y bueno, también en inglés. Para la gente que no ha podido estar aquí, os hago una idea de lo que también se debate en esta cumbre. Luego sacaremos las conclusiones. Una abrazo desde Madrid. Decirlo feo, la gente son los medios. La gente son los medios.